I have some upgrade projects that I'm going to show you. That's for an Irwin, all Irwins. In particular, this is an Irwin 38, but it could be done with all Irwins. I did it with my last Irwin, which was a 32.5 center cockpit, and actually any boat can be done. But what Irwin did on their main hatchboard covers, and you all recognize this, is on the, I think the later ones, this one I have is an 86. What they did is in the upper board they installed louvers in place, and the problem with the louvers was it let air in. I know they used it for air circulation, but it really wasn't necessary. It let air in, and if you have air conditioning in a boat, you're letting air in, humid air in, you can't block it off. So what I ended up doing was I wanted to remove these louvers because they really were useless. And what was done was on the back side of the board, turn it around, on the back side of the board they had the louver in place, and they had a little piece of teak that overlapped the louver that hid the edge. It was overlapped and hid the edge, and that held the louver in place. So what I did was I pried the teak up, and that gave me access to the louver, and I just pried the louver out, and here they are. There's two of them, one for each side. But what I ended up doing, I wanted to use Lexan, and I picked up a 4x8 sheet of Lexan. And when I put this louver in place, they had dadoed the inside of this side and this side. It was dadoed. And what I was able to do was, when I measured the Lexan that I wanted to use, I made it an inch longer, so I was able to push, and this side is exactly, it's not dadoed, it's exact. And I was able to push the Lexan in all the way past here. It dropped down and I pulled it back. So it's flush with this, and it's actually sitting deep into here. And then at that point in time, I had some teak, and I cut some strips, and I put some trim in here to hold the whole thing in place. It's glued with Gorilla Glue, and I use brass brads you can pick up at the Home Depot, and I just tacked these in. Did both sides, sanded it smooth, and then varnished the inside, the outside. Obviously the outside wasn't touched, other than sanding it, and used Sick and Cetol. And I did run a very thin bead of silicone caulk along this edge. Kind of forced the tube in here, and the reason why the plastic is still on here is I want to protect several things that happens is that when you put silicone on and leave the plastic on, once the silicone cures, you take a utility knife and you just slice the excess silicone off, and when you peel the plastic off, anything that's stuck to the plastic covering comes off. If you take the plastic off in advance and then you put the silicone on, what happens is you get silicone onto the Lexan window. It doesn't look very professionally installed. It just looks sloppy, and I've seen a lot of guys do that, and they got silicone, they use their finger to smooth it out, and they got a silicone mess on the window. And I try to avoid that, so by leaving the plexi on, it does that. Now these windows are smoked. I'm only going to peel away this side. It's tinted. The other side, the reason why you can't see through it is because the other side, it still has the white plastic on it. I'm leaving this on so I get to the boat so I don't scratch anything, and that's why this one's on. That's the upper board. The lower board, which I have here, and it's the same, a little bit different. Now this one didn't have louvers. This one just had a sheet of 1/4-inch plywood that was put in place. The inside was it was plywood on one side with a kind of wood-grained formica, and the outside was teak, and it deteriorated pretty bad. It really crumbled away. So I ended up wanted to remove that, and what I ended up doing was taking a saw and cutting a section out, and that gave me the ability to cut it and kind of cut down with a jigsaw and pull the pieces up. And pull a piece out and then pull it down, and pull a piece out, and did the same thing all the way around. So I got it out without. I didn't want to disassemble this frame because it's glued and put together very nicely. And the way I put the new piece in, it's kind of interesting, was I took a router, and since there's an actual slot on all four, but the slot on the two ends are very deep they're way back into here, about there, about more than an inch in, and the slots on the upper and lower are just deep enough. Actually, they're this width right here, this extra piece. So what I did was, when I cut the plexi, I cut it the exact size in this direction. This direction I made it an inch bigger. I ended up pushing the plexi into the groove, sliding it so the excess went there. This side dropped in, and then I pulled it back. I left of course I cut the protective covering plastic piece off here, this plastic covering, so that wouldn't be inside there. It's just Lexan in there, and I cut it short first and marked it. And then the outside, I didn't do anything. I didn't have to do anything with the router because I wanted this this lip that was in here all the way around to seal it. Once it was in place, I ended up putting the only the lower and the upper. I cut strips, and that locked it in, and that's glued in using brass nails. That locks everything in so the window can't come out and it can't slide. I trimmed it and varnished it on the inside, on the outside. That's the inside. The outside, what I did was I left the plastic on, obviously, and I put a silicone. I took a silicone and I forced it into that whatever space there was all the way around, the very thin bead with a small tube. I didn't smear it with my finger, that makes a mess. And I let the silicone cure, and I went in with a utility knife, a very sharp knife, and I just cut along the edge. What that did was that enabled me to peel away the silicone, and anything that went onto the plastic protective sheeting, when I peel this back, that will come off with it. So I've seen guys try to use their finger, and they end up getting the silicone onto the window, and it just looks very messy, and that's something that you'll try to avoid doing. It looks like an amateur installer. The other thing that I did do was all Irwins have opening hatches, and on mine the hatches, the plexi Lexan started to craze real bad. I'll turn it, you can see it. It's almost like it's shattered, but it's not. It's just from the UV breaking down the plastic, and it's got these micro cracks in it. It doesn't leak, but it looks really bad. It makes the boat look very old. So with the same plastic that I purchased, the 4x8 sheet, I measured this up and put it on my tabletop saw and cut a bunch of new ones. Here it is here. I didn't peel the backside off. It will be done once I install it. And these will be installed in place. And the method of installation, which is really interesting, what I found out when I removed the old one, was they use two different caulks. They use a first caulk they use on the base of the hatch was a black mastic that it's not a silicone. It doesn't cure like silicone. It always stays tacky. And they ran a bead of that around the base of it. They pressed the window in place, and then they took clear silicone and they ran a bead of that between the plastic and the aluminum hatch and all the way around. And of course they let it cure. They trimmed it, and that was the installation. To remove it was easy. I took a utility knife and I slit the silicone, the clear silicone, all the way around to break it loose, and then I just simply pushed the hatch up, and it came right up out because this silicone, this black mastic never really, it's not like silicone. It doesn't cure like silicone. It stays tacky all the time, which is messy. If you lay this down on something, it leaves black marks and it comes off. One of the secrets installing the new hatches is you drop the hatch in place with the plastic on it, and you go inside with either a pen, and you make a line on the inside where the aluminum frame is, and you make a line all the way around, and then you peel away this white plastic. Or sometimes what I do is I drop it in place and take a utility knife and use the aluminum frame as a guide and slice the white plastic all the way around, and then you peel this white plastic just on the outside off, and that gives you a space, the width of the aluminum frame that is going to be bonded. And at that point in time, I take a 100 grit sandpaper and I very carefully sand that very narrow 1/4 inch wide edge of the plastic. And the reason why the white plastic is left on, this protective covering, is so you don't scratch it with the sandpaper. And very carefully sand it all these around. And the reason why is plastic is very smooth and silicone doesn't like to bond very well to it. So you need to rough it up. You need to you need to put a tooth in it or put a rough surface on it so the silicone can bond very easily. It has no problem bonding to the aluminum frame, but doesn't like to bond very well to the Lexan. Once you do that, you still leave the plastic on. You push this, run a bead of silicone around. You force this down in place. Silicone oozes up wherever, and then you run another bead of silicone between the frame edge and the plastic all the way around. You let everything cure, then you take your razor knife and you slice it off, kind of like in this direction, like this, and on same thing on the underside. And then at that point in time, that's when you take your protective coating off, because if any silicone were to get on the protective coating, when you peel this off, it comes off with it. So when you're finished, you don't have a messy. I've seen guys try to take their finger and smooth it out, and they get silicone onto this plastic surface, and it just looks bad. It looks like it really looks like a bad installation. Let's talk about the plastic. It's 1/4 inch thick. It could be Lexan. It could be any one of the plastics they use for windows. I picked this up at a place here in New Jersey called Acme Plastics. It's a big plastics distributor. They don't manufacture, but they distribute plastics. And they have a warehouse you walk into, and it's got stacks and stacks of plastic. This is 1/4 inch smoked. This was what they call an overstock item. What they do is when they have too much of an item, they put it on sale. And I paid for a 4x8 sheet. I paid $65, which was an excellent price. Normally it's like $210. And I was willing to pay that, but I went on the internet and found that they had overstock, and it was 1/4 inch, and they have a multitude of colors. I went right to their warehouse and picked it up. It's in Little Falls, New Jersey. Showed up in their sales office, said I need a piece. I paid them cash. 5 minutes later, it's being loaded into my van. It's a good place to go. I've used them for many years. They're an excellent place. I've been using those since the 60s when I used to work in that area. And I'm able to get quite a few out of it so far. I cut eight of these, and I cut, on this I cut 2 of those, and I cut, for my buddy, he has a Cape Dory 32, and I cut, out of his, I cut 2 of his hatches because he was doing the same thing. So out of, for $65, I was able to replace a lot of the hatches, and inexpensively. It's certainly cheaper than replacing the whole hatch, which a lot of people do. Or if you try to go to the manufacturer of the hatch and try to order from them, you're going to pay a lot more than $10 per plastic hatch covering. You're going to pay, I haven't even checked, but I think it's somewhere around $80 per sheet, where you can do it a lot cheaper. So that's a scoop on an upgrade on replacing the plastic in the hatches. You could do it inexpensively. It's certainly something within the capability of the average guy, as long as he's got a tabletop saw. You don't want to use a jigsaw, because a jigsaw gives you too ragged of an edge and it's not straight. A tabletop saw, you cut it to the size, then you take the old one, you lay it over the top of this one with the plastic protective coating, and take a belt sander and you radius the corners. And I think it took me probably less than an hour to cut all of them, all 4 of them. I have 2 more to do, 2 more larger ones to do, which I have to remove from the boat. And that will be done when I install these, and then I'll take those out. And what I did was I took one out and covered it with a piece of plastic so the rain didn't get in there, and then they were all the same. So I'll be replacing, I have 4 of these that I have to put in, and I have 2 more I have to make for the other ones. And then of course these, I stuck a piece of plywood in the hatch temporarily so rain wouldn't get in, and these will be going in the next couple of days. So that should do it on this installment until the next upgrade comes along.